Welcome to another edition of the It's Cavalier podcast. It's your boy Mac, and tonight our Cleveland Cavaliers took on the Milwaukee Bucks in a game that was filled to the brim with absences. For Milwaukee, no Giannis, no Torian Prince. For Cleveland, no Donovan Mitchell out with the groin injury, no Evan Mobley who was out with injury maintenance, no Max Strus as he has been all season. And the one big addition to that list, that would be none other than James Harden, who fractured his non-shooting right thumb. So at the end of the day, I didn't quite know what to expect going into this one from a rotational standpoint. But the one thing that I can say is that I had full confidence in this team entering tonight to pull out a W. And while that was not the case, to be honest, I'm not really angry about this loss. I thought there was a lot of good effort out there. I love some of the individual performances that I saw. I'll dig into those in just a second. But I just want to highlight the fact that Kenny Atkinson decided to roll out a starting lineup of Dennis Schruder, Sam Merrill, Jalen Tyson, Dean Wade, and Jarrett Allen, if I'm not mistaken. But fret not, right? Dennis Schruder and company were more than up to the task in this game. That was evident from the tip off. But before we dig into the details, do your boy a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you're not yet a subscriber to this Cavalier podcast, and hit that notification bell so you stay locked in all season long. Now, as I mentioned, Dennis Schruder came to play tonight. This is his first start in the wine and gold. Somebody that has been a starter throughout the duration of their career, started so many games throughout the course of his 13 plus seasons in the NBA, 439 after tonight, which you need that type of experience when you have some of these primary rotational pieces out. You need somebody to come off the bench that can bring that energy, bring that leadership, and just bring that experience to the table. And that's exactly what Dennis did. And specifically in regard to Dennis, he would have finished the night with 26 points, 2 rebounds, 5 assists out there, a steal. He was a pretty efficient 8 of 14 from the field. That is good for 57.1%. And maybe the best part of all is that that 3-point shot finally started to fall for Dennis. Not necessarily something that I expected going into today, but going 3 of 6 from 3-point range after beginning the season, or rather beginning his Cavalier tenure pretty abysmally from 3-point range, is something to take away, right? I think the 3-point shot might actually be back. Now, mind you, he came into tonight completing just 22.7% from range since coming over to Cleveland. He was just 5 of 22 coming into tonight's festivities. And again, he managed to drill 3 of 6. And that was basically in the first half. So it was nice to see that. And we already know about the on-ball gravity and the fact that he can get to the rim at will, and he's an excellent driver of the basketball, but making defenders respect your shot is huge. Hopefully tonight can be somewhat of a jumping off point in that respect for Dennis Schroeder. And I know he didn't make that last attempt prior to the Jarrett Allen offensive rebound that was just a smidge too late in terms of getting the shot back up, but I was really impressed with what we saw from Dennis from an individual standpoint. I felt that he had a nice 2-man game working with Jarrett Allen. We'll talk about Jarrett Allen here in just a second. I felt that he was in command of the offense. I thought that the defense at the point of attack and the disruption out there, meaning going out there and making plays in the passing lanes and just being a general chaos agent, I thought that he really was somewhat of a two-way force tonight. And I couldn't be happier about the individual performance that we got to see out of one Dennis Schroeder. Now, as I mentioned, Jarrett Allen was absolutely magnificent for most of tonight, right? 27 points, 11 rebounds. That is not a stat line that comes around too often for too many bigs. Jarrett Allen in his time out there on the court, 27 points, 11 boards, an assist, 2 steals, I believe, a block. He was 10 of 15 from the field, and he was 7 of 8 from the charity stripe. I was highly impressed with Jarrett Allen, much like I've been all season long with him. And I'll confess, with no Donovan Mitchell, no James Harden available, and having to rely upon Dennis and Craig Porter Jr., who, again, we'll talk about him in a minute too, because Craig had a pretty impressive performance, pretty impressive display in his time out on the court tonight as well. But I say all this to say that I was really, really wondering how they would try and get Jarrett Allen the ball. Now, I think you got your answer pretty early on. Dennis, Tyson, Sam, Craig, they all made concerted efforts to try and get the ball to Jarrett Allen down low. And Jarrett, for what it's worth, he was out there hustling on the glass. There was a certain point throughout this game where he was an absolute menace out there. I think he put on 4 offensive rebounds within the first 7 minutes of the game. That's just Mitchell Robinson type stuff out there. And he kept generating those extra possessions. And I know there's this one sequence that occurred where he had pulled down, I don't know, 2 or 3 on one specific possession that it looked like a YMCA game out there. It truly did. It was like watching a middle or high school game. And while it didn't result in Cavs buckets, it was still nice to see him put together the effort and just try and generate some of those additional opportunities when the shots were not falling early on. But Jarrett Allen in particular, he was phenomenal tonight. He continues to be phenomenal. I've discussed ad nauseum what he has looked like post All-Star break, really post trade, and it's just been phenomenal. And obviously, it's coincided a lot with the new additions, but again, he's been doing this stuff since before they even got here. In fact, over Jarrett Allen's last 10 games, factoring in tonight, he's averaging 22 points, 11.8 rebounds, and 1.8 assists, and completing a staggering 73.1% from the field. That is absolutely insane production. That is highly efficient basketball. And tonight, in a night where there is no Evan Mobley, there is nobody else out there truly that can take over a game in that painted area and get those touches in the low post. Jarrett Allen was the lone true big because Dean Wade was a starter beside him, and you relied upon Thomas Bryant, Naquan Tomlin, and a few others to contribute off the bench in the front court. So Jarrett Allen, he had himself a night. Really awesome to see what he was able to bring to the table. It wasn't a perfect performance by any stretch of the imagination. I think he had 10 rebounds at the half and only finished the game with 11. So you do the math, just 1 rebound additional after or in the following 2 third and fourth quarters. So I wanted to see a little bit more on that end, but that's not always a Jarrett Allen thing. Sometimes that's just where the ball is not landing your way. Sometimes the opposition is making shots, and sometimes you are. So the opportunities to put on those rebounds may not have been as flush in the third and fourth as they were in the first and second. All of that said, the Cavaliers, it was kind of all over the place tonight, and probably one of the biggest indicators of how chaotic it was that of Keon Ellis. My God, ladies and gentlemen, Keon Ellis is just an agent of chaos. He is a two-way force. I am really thankful that Sacramento chose to send both Dennis and Keon to Cleveland in exchange for DeAndre. And tonight, Keon took a major step in the right direction. 14 points, 4 rebounds, I believe, 3 assists, 2 steals, a block, was 5 of 9 from the field, and shot 4 of 8 from three-point range. That is the type of stuff you want to see out of Keon Ellis, because one of the big selling points of this acquisition was the fact that Keon was a reliable shot maker from three-point distance on pretty damn good volume, right? He's a career 41.1% shooter from three-point range. Entering today, he was knocking down just 35.7% from three-point distance. He had taken a massive hit since coming over to Cleveland in that area, knocking down just 7 of 24, which is 29.2% in his 8 previous games as a Cleveland Cavalier. But tonight should help those percentages go up, as he has now knocked down 11 of 28. So that should definitely help. Well, actually, I don't think that's accurate. Let me do the recount on that. He has knocked down 11 of 32. So the percentage will go up after tonight's performance. It's not going to be anything to write home about, but it's a step in the right direction. And you can tell just being out there, there's a portion of the fan base that was a little skeptical of Keon in this acquisition just because of the size. Obviously, when they moved off of DeAndre Hunter, one of the biggest complaints was that they were sacrificing size for some of the playmaking and driving and point of attack defense. And you can argue that, yeah, that is part of it, but I think they were pretty comfortable with where they were at prior to this. And they just understood that, hey, you know what, size wasn't going to play too big of a factor here anyway, because of DeAndre not necessarily being this like truly stout defender out there. But Keon, he legitimately plays bigger than his size. He is somebody that will continuously muck up the passing lanes. He will reject shots. He will pick the ball off, right? He will swipe it right away from you, and he'll stay glued to your hips in terms of perimeter isolation defense. And I just am very, very happy that the Cavaliers were able to land him in that deal, because I do think that this is a person that can be heavily impactful come the postseason, especially if that three-point shot is falling. That was really, you wanted to see the other shoe drop, because you knew the defense that he was capable of playing with, because he's been doing that since he came over. But the three-point shot, that's been kind of hit and miss. And tonight it was 50-50, right? He shot 50% from three-point range. So that was a lovely sight. Some of that was on the ball too, right? You saw some pull-ups. That's pretty damn awesome. I think that was a sight for sore eyes. And I mentioned this on the stream with Spencer Davies a little earlier, but Keon, right? Despite the low volume, he's somebody that has definitely been able to get to that short mid-range area throughout his career. I don't necessarily think that's going to come at high volume for the Cavaliers as well, but the on-ball creativity and creation, that's something that he brings to the table, and I'll be interested to see how Kenny Atkinson allows that to be brought to the table on a continuous basis. But those are some of the individual performances that I was really, really excited about. It wasn't just them. As I mentioned before, Craig Porter Jr., I thought that he had a pretty solid game tonight. 8 points and 9 assists off that Cleveland bench in about 21 minutes and 47 seconds of action. He put a lot of pressure on the rim. He hit cutters. He dumped off a lot, and you got just about as much playmaking out of him as you would have if James Harden and Donovan Mitchell were making some of these same types of plays that Craig was providing. So that was good sight to see. You didn't get as much offense as you would, obviously, in Craig, that you would have out of your starting caliber, your star guards out there. But I thought that Craig Porter Jr. definitely brought the playmaking to the table that you normally see. And 9 assists off the bench ain't nothing to sneeze at. So credit where it's due for Craig Porter Jr. It was nice to see Naquan Tomlin out there, though he played just 8 minutes of 51 seconds of action. He's somebody that's going to be consistently fluctuating now with all of the depth in town, and I expect that to be the case when everybody's healthy. But in a night like tonight, where you're missing Evan, when you're missing Donovan, when you're missing Harden, and you still don't have Max, somebody's got to step up. Somebody's got to be included in that rotation. And though he was cut out of it in the second half, as Kenny essentially went to an 8-man rotation, it was still nice to see him. Not the best Sam Merrill performance. Clearly, I think the wrist and the hands were kind of bothering him. He took quite a number of falls. He was all over the place today. I give that man his credit, though, because the one thing you can never question about Sam Merrill is how much he hustles, how much heart he shows, and just his love and passion for the game of basketball. Because he may not be this elite point of attack defender, he may not be this elite ball handler, though it was nice to see him put the ball on the floor and attack the interior of the defense today. He did that on a number of occasions, and he cut to the basket at will off the ball. That was also nice to see. But Sam, he was consistently on the floor on the defensive end, whether he was getting screened or he was just getting knocked over, or on offense, whether he was driving to the rim and just getting knocked over and taking consistent falls. And I think at a certain point that started to really bother him, and the shot just wasn't on for him. He was 6 of 13 from the field, though. That's 46.2%. It's just the 3-point shot wasn't necessarily falling for him. 2 of 8 from 3-point range. He would finish with 14 points, 5 boards, 2 assists. So not the perfect Sam Merrill performance, but a solid one in a starting beside Dennis Schruder. Dean Wade, this was not a great Dean Wade game. If we're going to be objective, right? Yesterday was a phenomenal performance from Dean Wade. Today, not so much. He was pretty non-existent on the offensive side of the basketball. His stat line is obviously going to paint a pretty ugly picture in terms of what he was able to provide on that end. All 4 from the field, including all 3 from 3-point distance. I'm sure somebody will use this as ammunition to say why he doesn't need to start. But to be honest with you, I'm not doing that tonight. I'm not having that conversation. It's just there were so many missing pieces out, and Dean is more of one of those guys. He's one of those guys that's more of a connector than he is somebody that's truly going to stand out when you have those absences, because his role doesn't really shift even when somebody is in and out of the lineup. It's mostly just off the ball. And tonight, the shot was not falling, and it was low volume. So I'm not really going to dive deep into that. Jalen Tyson, the one credit that I'll give Jalen is that one double tonight. 14 points, really impressive on the glass, 10 rebounds for him, but he was just 5 of 16 from the field in the three-point shot, just like Dean and Sam. The shot was not falling from the perimeter for him either. 1 of 6 from three-point range. But again, Tyson, he's been in and out of the starting unit. That you have to admit that at some point that probably does affect your flow out there, because you're not really sure where your spot on the rotation is. You're not really sure where those minutes are going to come from and whether or not you're going to get those on and off the ball reps that you had been used to entering this deadline right after the acquisition of Harden and whatnot. I'll tell you this though. Comments that were made by Kenny Atkinson, I think yesterday or recently, about Tyson needing to earn his spot in the rotation. I got to admit, that left kind of a sour taste in my mouth, just because I feel like Tyson has already earned a role in the rotation. And you can argue that it's not necessarily about, the starts versus coming off the bench, but rather the minutes themselves. But that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, considering that Tyson has legitimately been one of the biggest bright spots of the season for Cleveland. It's not always pretty. He will have some nights where he puts up some pretty inefficient totals out there, though he does score the basketball and he can get to the rim and he can draw contact. Though all of that is true, I feel like he has earned a high minutes role in this rotation. So I didn't love to hear Kenny Atkinson saying that, but nevertheless, he did draw the start tonight at the 3. And as guys continue to come back, we'll end up seeing what happens with the rotation and as it relates to Tyson. But I just didn't like that one. Not too much else really to take away from this one. Thomas Bryant, he gave us some good minutes at points. He would finish with 11 points. He was 4 of 8 from the field. But this is one of those ones that you kind of just chalk up to, yeah, they just did not have enough to get it done. But I also want to take this time to give the Milwaukee Bucks some credit here too, because they knocked down some very timely shots when they needed to. Ryan Rollins, former Cavalier Kevin Porter Jr., he was out there doing some stuff, especially on the defensive side of the basketball, where he racked up 5 steals. Now, I know that KPJ is a very mercurial person. There's some history there, obviously, off the court. I'm not going to bring it up right now. You guys know what I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, objectively speaking, KPJ is a pretty solid basketball player, and he's shown that this season for the Milwaukee Bucks. What I will say is this, though, right? I didn't feel like this is a game in which Milwaukee just absolutely they deserve to win this game so much as Cleveland deserved to lose or anything like that. I just legitimately felt like it was a pretty good basketball game. If you're not a fan of either of these teams, you probably watched this one and said to yourself, this is some fun basketball, right? It was chaotic at points. As I mentioned, it felt like a YMCA game, a local pickup game. There was just a lot of shit going on. And objectively speaking, it was just a fun game. I know it is an L, and I know that this is a performance that we were hoping that they could bring home before this eventual Detroit matchup on Friday, which is obviously the bigger one to worry about. But I'm not all that mad, especially coming off a victory on the first leg of this back-to-back against the New York Knicks, who are ahead in the standings. So I don't put too much stock into it from a win-loss standpoint. I'm more so looking at these individual performances and trying to glean what I can moving forward. Like, I legitimately believe Dennis Schroeder's three-point stroke, that coming back, that could potentially be very impactful, because the defense is going to have to start paying attention to him again. They can't sag off of him like I've seen it some points during his 9 games here now. Keon Ellis, very much the same. The three-point shot hasn't necessarily traveled prior to tonight from Sacramento, but it was a major step in the right direction. We already knew the defense that he's capable of, but that off and on the ball shot making was a sight for sore eyes. So I'm really happy that we got that production. Jarrett Allen, as always, that was a great performance, but that's really it. So I'll just go ahead and hop into the chat, and then we'll get out of here. Very quick stream. Let's see here. What do we got? J47 says Payne Gamble the Camel says, damn, that was close. Yeah, it was. I was really hoping because I posted the clip, right? A little bit prematurely, I suppose. I posted the clip of Jarrett Allen grabbing that offensive rebound and putting the shot back up. And it didn't count. Obviously, the shot clock expired, or not the shot clock, the game clock expired before he got the shot off. But it was a really nice effort out there. Nate 406 says Thomas Bryant plus 16 over Allen in 60 minutes of action before we start glazing Allen again. Nate, sometimes I legitimately can't tell whether or not whether or not you're being serious or if you're trolling, because there's no way in hell you watched that game and said to yourself Thomas Bryant was better than Jarrett Allen because of the plus minus. HJ17 says the Asian ref, I think his number was 78, needs to be investigated for rigging or needs to get a glasses prescription because, good God, he missed a lot of calls. Listen, I don't like to use ref ball as an excuse for this team. I do feel like they've been missing a lot of calls lately, especially as it relates to James Harden, but Harden wasn't out there. There were definitely some non-calls, definitely some that I felt like the Cavaliers deserve to get. And at other points, right, I just feel like this team is not being officiated fairly, but I'm not going to use tonight as the night to do that. If like Spoke says, I'm proud of the guy still, but question, why did Kenny not call a timeout? I don't know. Sometimes I give up on trying to question why a head coach does or doesn't do what you would want them to do. Bread VR says the refs rigged the game. If like Spo says, the officiating has been horrific for the Cavs in a few of these last games. We can't buy a whistle. One of the last plays when Sims stole the ball from Jarrett, Rollins was clearly grabbing Jarrett's leg. Yeah, there's so many non-calls that have been really pissing me off lately. It's just kind of like beating a dead horse at this point. It's just kind of to be expected because his team just doesn't have the respect of the refs at this point in time. And that's even after adding James Harden, who entered the Cavaliers really drawing a lot of contact and drawing a lot of fouls. Floyd Phillips second says Dean Wade, a complete no-show. I hate to say it, but that was the case tonight. Nate 406 says Kevin Porter Jr. revenge game. I mean, I guess. Basketball Gooner says, bro, that was a brutal watch. I didn't think it was a brutal watch. I honestly thought that was a pretty fun game. I think that objectively speaking, there were definitely things that pissed me off, but it had the feel of a low stakes game where anything could happen. And Milwaukee walked away with the W. And I'm not too mad about that, considering that we did see some pretty fantastic individual performances. Floyd Phillips second says, Ellis is a keeper. He absolutely is. I hope they get the job done and re-sign him. They do have his bird rights after the acquisition. So we'll see what they end up doing, but it's not as straightforward and simple as that. There's a lot of money. They're still a second apron team right now after keeping Max Strus. So they might have to finagle a few things. Plus, considering the fact that they do have other contract extensions to consider as well, right? You got the money that's finally going to start adding up here, and Donovan and Evans extensions. You have Dean Wade and whatever decision you're going to make with him. You got Keon Ellis decision. James Harden has a player option. From a monetary standpoint, there's some significant hurdles there, but I don't think they would have traded for him if they weren't intending to keep him. And they do have the ability with the bird rights. So we'll see what happens. Let's see here. Janky Jimenez says that's just not the team you want to face in the first round. I would prefer the Raptors or something. To be honest with you, if the Cavaliers have who they have, right, if guys are healthy, this is not a team that really bothers me. Unless this is in reference to the healthy Sixers is an oxymoron. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Abdul Smith says, how are you a starter and score 0 points? We see it in the NBA actually pretty frequently. It's Dean Wade is not exclusive to that. Does anybody remember Tony Snell? Nobody remembers Tony Snell. That's something that he pretty much made routinely happen, I feel like. Nicotine 2977 says Dean hasn't earned the starting job any more than Tyson, so I don't get the Kenny comment. Yeah, I didn't love that one. I think that if you're going to start Dean, just let it be that. I don't know why you have to make the comment like Tyson hasn't been phenomenal for the bulk of the season. It hasn't been perfect, but the leap from year 1 to year 2 has been like just phenomenal, right? He represented Cleveland in the Rising Stars game, had a pretty good game, mind you, in that Rising Stars game. But What I will say is this, right? I do still trust Kenny Atkinson to, when it comes down to it, to make some of these choices. Some of them are head scratching, some of them are questionable, but some of that to me is simply due to the fact that there has been consistent shuffling here. The team has always kind of struggled with health. You didn't have Don tonight. Hopefully the groin is okay. I think this is more so a rest, same as it was for Evan. He's not playing back to backs. James, that's definitely one to keep track of, though it is not on his shooting hand and he can play through it if he so chooses. I think it's mostly a pain tolerance thing at this standpoint or at this point in time. So we'll have to see what ends up happening there. But I don't know. I think a lot of these rotational choices by Kenny, it's simply just boiling down to who's available and the fact that they have to play small a lot of the time. And I know people don't love that, but since you have this bevy of players that most of them do deserve minutes, they're going to play small more often than not. Rob Kuhn says Keon Ellis may be the best in-ball defender we've seen in 10 years as a Cavalier on ball. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. He is just absolutely he's glued to your hip out there, right? You wanted that. That's part of this acquisition. You knew that the defensive tenacity that he brings to the table. And mind you, like maybe that's not even the right way to term it, because when I look at Dennis play defense, his tenacity is what makes him such a viable defender. It's not like he's this elite point of attack defender, but it's tenacity on that end, his willingness to get his hands dirty and not get back down. That has what has made his defense so impressive out there outside of like the passing lanes, jumping them and swiping the ball away. But Keon, on the other hand, he's technically sound. He doesn't really bite on the pump fake too often. He closes out when he needs to. He rotates. It's beautiful stuff to see out there. And so, yeah, on the ball, he has been a phenomenal defender. And I know that in terms of the percentiles, because you guys know I love stats. I love representing the stats through the film as well. Like I love pairing the two side to side, but y'all know I love a good old stat. And Keon has definitely graded highly in that respect throughout years in his past. And while it's not as high level as it has been in previous years, this season he is still in the 77th percentile in terms of perimeter ISO defense, which is pretty damn good. He's an excellent navigator of screens, whether that be on the ball or off of it. He's obviously an exceptional pickpocket, being able to swipe the ball away from you in the 92nd percentile there, 93rd percentile in passing lane defense. And then we've already talked ad nauseum about the block and steal percentages, right? It's been stuff that you haven't really seen happen individually for a number of years. So I love it. Hopefully that continues. And tonight just is another feather in the cap of Kobe Owen and Mike Gansey in that regard, because they showed exactly, him and Dennis showed exactly why you acquired them. Nicotine says Keon is a menace on defense. He covers so much ground so quick. He's elite. And I think I mentioned this on one of those things, one of those streams recently, that Keon, one of the things I love the most about him from a defensive standpoint is how aggressively he closes out to the 3-point line. Now, obviously, that's been a huge issue for this team for the duration of the season. But Keon Ellis in particular, and Dennis is kind of the same way. These guys close out aggressively. They will leap into the stands damn near to make sure you don't get an uncontested triple out there. I cannot be the only person to see that. So I love it. I'm hoping that tenacity kind of rubs off on the rest of the Cavaliers, because that's been a team-wide issue. But Keon in particular, and Dennis somewhat, they've been awesome. HJ17 says, did D-Mitch just rest tonight, or is the injury real? Honestly, I don't know. They listed him on the official NBA report with a groin injury, so probably something that he's just dealing with, one of those nagging injuries. But what better game than a game like this against Milwaukee with no Giannis, right? And you thought you had enough to get it done, and they didn't, and that's okay. But I would much rather have him be available for that Detroit game on Friday than tonight's game against Milwaukee, if you had to choose one of the two. Let's see. There's some really there's some really nasty comments in the chat, guys. Jeez Louise. That being said, I think that's really about it for tonight. I think that there's some things that you can take away from this one. Obviously, Keon, J.A., Dennis, Craig Porter Jr. for what it's worth. And then there's everything else probably just throw out and wait till Friday, and we'll see where we get there, because that's an important one. You got two, I believe, against Detroit coming up. You got this one on Friday, and then you play them again on March 3rd in Cleveland. And these are going to be some pretty damn good games. I think I was in a space the other day, and somebody asked me what I was looking most forward to in those games. And selfishly, I said Cade versus Wade, because Dean Wade is just like Jalen Brunson, just like Jason Tatum and a number of other players. Wade has actually been a problem for Cade Cunningham. But we'll have to see. I think there's some other individual matchups. Obviously, if Beef Stew, I haven't checked, but is Beef Stew and Jalen Duren back yet? I think they are. But I assume that the battle between Jalen Duren and Jarrett Allen should be big. And then whoever they have playing against Beef Stew, whether that be Jarrett Allen as the playing those backup 5 minutes, or you're asking maybe Thomas Bryant, because that's a game, is one of those matchups that I feel like Bryant probably should be out there for, similar to how I felt that he should have been out there a little bit more in that New York matchup. But I'm not mad about that, because the Cavaliers won convincingly. So I got my eye looking forward here. Friday should be a big game. I'm glad that the Cavaliers get some rest, and hopefully we'll see the full complement on Friday, and that which includes James Harden, even with the fractured finger. But we will see. If you're still here by chance, do your boy a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you're not yet a subscriber to this Cavalier podcast. Do the same for Positive Hooper. If you want to support the show in a small but helpful way, consider becoming a member over on Patreon. You can do that on YouTube as well for as little as $1 a month. But even if you don't, your boy will still be here, because I love this team, and I know you guys do too. Go Cavs.